Welcome back, everybody. Farmall Super M front wheel swap continues. And I'm a bit embarrassed to admit it, but when we did all the sandblasting in the previous episode, there was a key piece that I forgot. It was the large 13-inch diameter steel pulley that we picked up for the Super M at the swap meet this spring. I was so laser focused on doing this wheel change, completely slipped my mind. So I took all the sandblasting stuff back out last night, set it all back up. I did this, and while I was at it, I also sandblasted that paper pulley hub from the pulley that we disassembled here several episodes back. So that's all prepped and looking good, ready to send off whenever we have an opportunity. So it was a bit more work. We have rounded out a new potential paint batch now, though, for the Super M. So where the project stands right now, both of the front hubs have been taken back apart, and I've stripped all of the pieces from the insides of them. Inner bearings, outer bearings. We've got the grease seal sleeves. They drive out when you drive that inner race out. This one would have been good to go again. It's not perfect, but it's not completely trashed. This one, however, completely trashed. That would just chew a seal right up. So we'll get new ones of those on the way. And of course, the grease slinger little tin guards that are driven in behind both of the bearing races, those have been taken out as well. So we've made sure we don't have any grit left inside those grease cavities. But now is where the real work begins. Because that Farmall Super M has that aftermarket Norden wide front end on it, these pieces will not just readily interchange with that unit. So we need to get the Super M up here, figure out what we're going to have to do to make all those IH parts fit. So once again, this is what we are trying to eliminate. It's the aftermarket Norden 6-bolt flange center hub with the pressed steel one-piece rim. It gets to be a whole lot of red. You lose that silver accent that the authentic Farmall 2-piece hub with bolt-on silver rim would give you. However, because that Norden is the heavy version, this solid one-piece rim held up a lot better like under loader work than the 2-piece Farmall originals. Now that we don't have a loader on this tractor anymore, we can delete this and try to get something that looks more OE compatible. Plus we can hang some more wheel weight jewelry up front as well. Our problem though, the wheel bearings are all different and the hub bores are different and the spindle size on that Norden is different. And so we need to try to find some inner workings that are going to agree with the Norden spindle and also agree with the Farmall M hubs. Thankfully, the grease seal, that's an IH original, as is the the felt dust ring, all that stuff will transfer and fit those hubs right there just fine. So we'll start with the outer bearings. So the Norden outer bearing is a lot smaller in most regards than the IH. Okay, you can see the rollers are smaller, the cage is shorter, the race as well. Here's the IH outer race. That's not even close to even fitting inside that hub. So even the Norden outer race is smaller. They also do not use these grease catchers, these little 10 pieces inside the Norden hub. Thankfully, all that bearing race stuff doesn't really pose a problem because the center hole between the two outer bearings is the same size. So we'll take the M bearing out, we'll just verify that fit. So we'll size that M outer bearing on the spindle, perfect fit. We can go one step farther. Here's the original Farmall M outer race plus that grease catch. We'll just do a dry run test fit assembly of all these three pieces. All of those are going to work. So no interchange needed here. We just order up the standard replacement Farmall M bearing and race. We can still reuse the grease slinger, but problems begin to pop up when we get back here. When we start talking about inner bearings, none of this stuff is even close. So here's the Norden bearing, and here's the Farmall M bearing. We'll take both of these out, check the fit. We know the Norden bearing fits. That was on there already. But if we take the Farmall M hub bearing, it's too small. Okay, so the Norden spindle is larger on the inside than the factory Farmall M. So the bearing is a no-go. And if the bearing is a no-go, that means the grease catch is also a no-go because it also has to ride on this area of the spindle just inside of the bearing. That doesn't fit either. So we can't use these either in their original factory configuration. So bearings back. Now, add on top of all of that, the Farmall M inner race is larger than what the Norden hub used. So we can't take the Norden race out and put in the IH hubs, it'll be too loose. And the bearing that fits the Norden spindle does not fit the IH race. So none of these things agree. So this is where we get into the books. Yes, I'm always harping on books, but if you're gonna do this stuff, you have to have these things. So here's a highly recommended one. I picked it up not long ago. It's the International Ball and Roller Bearings Parts Catalog. This is the 18-BL. You can get them in 19, 20. That just indicates what level of publication that is, but they all go back to the very beginning. This is about a circa 1979 book right here, so we're well covered for Farmall M. But we have manufacturer's part numbers versus the IH part numbers, specifications, applications, invaluable book. So we can reference this to make sure we have the right Timken numbers. And on the Farmall M bearings, we know we can keep the outers because they will work on that Norden spindle. So that's the Timken 2878 bearing and the Timken 2820 race. Easy peasy right there. Now, figuring out our inner bearing combination is going to get a bit complicated, and I'm going to run through a lot of numbers here in a short amount of time. I'm hoping I don't completely lose everyone. So the bearings and races that came out of the Farmall M hubs, we can immediately scratch the Timken 342S bearing because we know that does not fit the Norden spindle. The Norden spindle needs a bearing with a 1.781 inch ID. So we can take the Timken 332 race that we know fits this IH hub and see if we can find a bearing that agrees with that race but also fits that Norden spindle. So using all of our reference material, I ran everything that fits into that 332 race. I came up with all of these bearing numbers all along here. None of them are the right ID. So that means we can't even use that original race that came out of the M hubs. So that leaves us with just one remaining option. We need to reuse this original Norden inner bearing. It's a Timken LM603049. And we need to find a race that not only fits this bearing, but also fits that IH hub. So we have a 1.781 ID. That's how the bearings are arranged in the master interchange. So here's our 1.781 ID column. This is the list of bearings. This is the list of races that fit them. These other columns are the dimensions of the races. All right. So right away we can find our LM603049, so we know we're in the territory. And if we look at, here we are, the Timken 332 cup had a 3.149 OD. So if we can find a 3.149 OD right there, the bottom two. So that means we can use an LM603014 or an LM603015. The 14 is too skinny. The 15, right on. So we can do the LM603049 bearing, LM603015 race, and we made it all fit. And also, because we need to order bearings, and that's going to take a few days for everything to show up, the front wheel goes back onto the Super M, and it will go back into the shed until we have enough parts to proceed. Good news, everybody. We were able to order up all the bearings. We found everything we need. It was all shipped. We had to splice together some new old stock and new stock, but these are all the LM series bearings and races for the inners, and we had to go with new old stock races. Those were really difficult to find. Here are all the Timkens, the bearings and the races for the outers. And both of these 2878s I had to source on the internet, new old stock, but we've got them. And here are the new grease seal sleeves. They will replace these old ones. So before we put anything together, I'm still thinking about this grease catch that goes behind the inner race. And I'd hate to just delete it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make my own, and I'm going to fashion them off of the outers where they're just a simple single step rather than a cup like that, because we need to make that center hole larger to fit that Norden spindle. So we're going to do a custom one-off. So I've been at work on the lathe. I took this scrap blank and I turned a step in it so that we can throw this in the press, and I found that if I use the old inner race, okay, that, here, let's turn it upside down. That fits the step on that old deflector very, very closely. So we can kind of use this as a pattern. We'll use this as a pressing tool. This is a pressing tool. Throw a piece of flat steel sheet in there, and we'll see if we can make something. So over to the press. So with nothing to center all these pieces up, we're just going to try the eyeball method to start with. And this is one of the sheets that I use for some of the thinner fold over locks, and it happens to match the thickness of the original grease shields. So, all right. My micrometer eyeball is slightly bionic now, so I'm still getting used to it. Give me just a second here. I'm going to look at this from about 8 different directions. We'll get it all where we're happy with it. All right, I don't think we're going to get any better than that. So let's do this. It's normal for this to ripple so much because what used to be flat is now stretched and compressed and really not happy. So it's all right. It's all about what the center is going to look like. We can flatten those edges later. Promising. Yeah. Now we finish off the outside and the inside, because those hole saws do not cut very even holes at all. Plus we need to get it right down to where it has to be a good fit beneath that bearing race. That's starting to look better, but I think you probably noticed it's got a little bit of a wobble to it. That's because we've put this piece through a lot of adversity, so it's going to go between the forming dies one more time in the press. It should flatten and true everything right back out. You can see how we're not as tight of a fit on top of our bottom adapter as we were right after the initial pressing. That's just from, you know, the hammering we did to flatten that piece of sheet steel back out, and then cutting it out and putting it in the lathe chuck. There we go. Every time I really concentrate on alignment, it's hard to keep talking at the same time. We got another pretty good scrunch on it. Much better fit now. Took all the wobble right out of it. Yep, I think that'll pass inspection. So that is how we ended up with both of our custom sized for the Norden front end with the IH front hub grease deflectors, grease dams, slingers, whatever you want to call them. They all accomplish the same task. So here's the new races for the inners. There's one of the bearings. So we'll just assemble one of these up real quick to show you how they're going to work. So this would be the inside of the hub right here, and the deflector goes on just like that beneath the race. And as you can see, we're slightly oversized beyond the ID of the bearing, so that means we'll have good clearance off of the actual spindle with the new deflectors that we made. So pretty happy with all that. Let's start putting back together. Grease deflector in first, the cup side goes down. There we go. And we stack the bearing race in on top of it. We'll use our driver. And because the comment section never fails to point this out, yes, I know these are originally designed to go the other way so that the taper is down in the race. The trouble is the taper that's machined on these has never matched the tapers of the races, and always wants to put like a little bit of a mark in the actual roller surface. So I just flip them around. So in case the comment section is trying to tell me something that they don't think I already know, I just beat them to the punch because I'm a smarty pants. That one's home. Time for the outer now. Original grease deflector goes in here. Thankfully we could reuse those. Here's, there we are. One of our new Timkins. Yep. All right. And to finish up the install, we're flipped back over again, the new grease seal sleeve. And of course we go crooked. There we are. That is one good looking hub. Okay, we've got everything here prepped and ready for paint. Long carriage bolts work excellent to turn into legs to hold odd shaped heavy things like these wheel weights and the hubs. And we've got our bolt boards out with all the hardware. This heavy monstrosity, I think I'm just going to paint as is. We'll have a good solid board, and then I'll do everything on the backside here first. I'll have some wires laid out so that once the backside is done, we can carefully roll it. This surface always gets masked because I don't want to have paint between the flanges. So we'll carefully set it on the wires on this surface here, and then we'll do the face of it and the whole front side, and then carefully carry the whole board in without that tipping and rolling off. We've done it before. Here's our next bit of trouble though. Can you see all this white fuzzy pollen that's floating by? Yeah, well, it's definitely spring. Everything's in full bloom, and everything knows it has about 2.5 weeks in this climate before it can't grow anymore. So we need to get all of this dirty air to settle down before we can do any painting at all. So between all of the parts we've already got prepped for the Farmall H that are waiting paint, and now all the parts that we have ready for the Super M, when things finally settle down, it is going to be just non-stop spraying, try and get all that stuff covered. So I don't know when that's going to happen. It could be another couple of weeks depending on weather. So I thank you everyone for watching. It's nice to have this little project as far along as it is, and now hopefully everybody sees why it took us so long to try to do that front wheel hub changeover on that Norden, because we knew it was going to be so involved. Still, I think we have a workable plan. So till next time, thank you for watching everyone.